I wanted to just start with the technical part because it's beautifully made film, beautifully shot, beautifully cut together, a wonderful score, and just brilliantly put together. So I just wanted to ask you, the crew that made this, the composer, the cinematographer, the editor, is it the crew you've worked with on all your films, or is this a different crew?
You know, previous film I made all by myself, and I used classical music from different libraries. This time there is a cinematographer who shot about 50% of the film, and I shot the other half. And I worked with him for hire before for something else, not my independent work, but I really like working with him. And there's a composer who specifically wrote original music for the film, and it was a whole process. Although there isn't much music here, it's very, very little moments where it is present. But we went through so many drafts with him.
Did he look at the cut of the film and then write the pieces to go with the film?
Yeah, I usually work a little bit differently with the music. I discuss the subject with the composer and everything, and the film, and what inspires me long before the cut is done. Usually before I start cutting the reel for all the submissions, grants, and everything, and for me and for myself to understand the story better. So, and I asked the composer to write a few themes that that inspire him, that material tells. I share some rough material with him, and he writes some initial themes, and then I start working with them, because I think when you, like for commercials that I do make the cut first, then the composer comes, fits the music in. But I think for something that has where you need to feel the space more, the timing, it doesn't work as well, because sometimes music itself inspires me to edit in a certain way, so I don't want for the music to just be there, the replacement or
an underscore.
Just there. Yeah, I try to incorporate it in the editing work. Yeah, and as for the crew question, I edited 90% of the film, and then there is a co-editor who is a producer of the film too, Victor. He was always there. He was editing also, and always helping me with feedback and everything.
No, well, it's as I said, beautifully made, and I think the music thing it's a really interesting question, and the way you work is interesting too, because it comes through, at least for me in the film, of really. It's used sparingly, but it's used to really enrich our understanding of these different characters and personalities, and what it is that they're having to contend with. So I just thought it was beautifully done.
Thank you so much.
So let's get to the topic and the subject and the story. So it's dedicated to your grandmother. Did your grandmother have these issues?
She died in January this year, when I was finishing the editing.
But she didn't have these issues?
No.
Okay, so how did you get onto these issues?
I just dedicated it to her because she was a psychologist, and I think through her personality, I got this interest in psychology, which I always had. What was your question? How did I find the topic?
How do you come on to the idea of dissociative identity disorder?
Right. So I was Victor, who is the producer of the film and a great friend of mine. We both love psychology, and we always read books and give to each other. And he told me that he read this book called Multiple Minds of Billy Milligan about the case of dissociative identity disorder here in America. And this book was interesting and popular because it described, non-fiction book, described the first case when in the court the person was not accused of the crime he committed because of the disorder. So it was officially in court. It was, taken into consideration. And when he told me about what he read in the book, I just couldn't believe him. I thought, well, I think Victor has other, he believes so many things. I don't really know. I am much more skeptical. I will never believe that. And then I read the book, and since that time, I just couldn't get it out of my head. And when I started doing research, I just couldn't stop.
So how did you come on to Karen? Because I'm guessing Karen was the first way into this. Is that correct?
She was the first way into this particular story and the film, how it ended up being. But I was doing a lot of the research, and I met a lot of other people before I met her. I went to a DID conference. I found out that there are 2 in America, dissociative identity disorder conferences, where dozens of people go. So I went to one of them in Seattle and met a lot of people there. And then I also realized that I can't go through a therapist because it's confidential information. The therapists usually can't reveal their clients. So I decided I could go through the people who already somehow were public. And I found out that there were quite a few, and there were a few books written. So I contacted a lot of people. I read a lot of books, and I contacted their authors. And she was one of them. She wrote a book called Amongst Ourselves, which is a guide for people with the disorder, for them, with different exercises and explanations of how to better live the life and what they can do to improve it. And I had a Skype call with her. And, like usually with people that I film, it's an instant intuition feeling that's the film, that's the charisma and some kind of connection, almost like love with the person or friendship, something between you and the person that makes you want to go and do it. And she invited me to stay with her at their house, and I went in 4 days. I was there after the call.
In Seattle?
She lives in San Diego.
In San Diego.
Yeah,
okay.
The Seattle was the conference.
Right, okay. And where was Marché?
And Marché was her patient.
Right.
So first we started filming with Karen, and just with her first, just getting to know her and, establishing trust and everything. And only then we asked, although I knew from the very beginning that she was a therapist, I didn't know in details how she worked and all of that. And once we got closer, we asked her if it would be possible to ask her clients to participate. And then it took time of all different kinds of questions. It's very tricky, and the subject is so sensitive. So we decided that she would ask her clients, those who would agree, obviously, only those we would film, but also we would show the film before releasing it into the world. We would show it to all the people filmed. And it was a very tough decision for me as a filmmaker because, we spent 4 years from the start to making this film. Shooting for a year and a half, then editing for 2 years, and to show it to the people, and then
the
expecting
option to not show it at all, yeah.
any kind of comments. But I went to my mentor when I was thinking about this. I had to make this decision. I went to my mentor, Michel Negroponte. He is a famous American filmmaker. Was my teacher in SVA, and he has done a lot of mental health films and really has experience with it. So he told me, he really recommended me to do that because he explained, and I really then understood it myself, what kind of responsibility it is to have on your shoulders, if somebody is not happy with something and they are so vulnerable to the extent that, how do you know what happens? What if people see it and, commit suicide or something? It triggers something that right. you might not even have an idea about, and then to live with it all your life. So I very, very seriously considered it, went to people to get their advice, and we decided to do it this way. And thankfully, there weren't any like huge comments from them. At the end.
Well, but giving anyone the right of refusal over a film that takes that long to make, and all the sensitivity that goes into it, and then.
But I thought with this film, I was the only right
with
decision.
multiple personalities, so that there's a lot of people that have to weigh in on the film. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I was going to ask you about that in the first place. When you went to Karen, how many of her inner people had to agree to this, and were there people that disagreed? Were there others that disagreed?
You know, with Karen, it's easier because she has an alliance, and she really is at that point when she can control the system, is very well balanced, and she knows, like, she sort of agrees on things first, and the conflict doesn't show outside. But Marche, she still has these issues, and she sometimes was at least when we were filming and showing, she was sometimes in denial. So when she saw the film, and it was hard for her to watch and still is, but Karen told me that she asked her how it was, and she said that Marche wasn't watching the film. Somebody else was.
Well, I guess that there's the fact of the multiple personalities being a defense mechanism and a coping skill.
Yeah.
That when there is something that threatens any kind of trauma, whether it's seeing the film or whether it's a trigger or whatever it is, that the mechanism works to the person most sensitive to it is not going to be watching. You know, let's have other people watch this. So that
the other thing, it's really hard for them to talk about it because a lot of the times the prosecutor's message is not to talk about it and keep it a secret. So it's for all these people, usually when they begin revealing it even in therapy, there is somebody in the system who watches and doesn't let them reveal it, because it's something that was, that was put into their minds since the very beginning,
right.
Since very young age, that, revealing it is breaking the rule. Like one of the person is saying, who is drawing under the tree,
right.
Her system.
Yeah, and it's because of the trauma, the idea, the imperative not to speak about it, that's a survival skill. It's
exactly.
Like, if I speak about it, I will die, therefore I cannot speak about it.
Exactly.
That has to be the guardian inside, has to stop them from speaking about it. But it's interesting to see the commonality of the childlike other, because obviously the trauma is almost always related to early childhood, so that person stays arrested in that period.
Almost all people that I met, even those that are not in the film, during the research, almost all of them had the children personalities.
Right, and so that's one thing. The other thing is that I thought that Marche, it may have been tough for her to see the film when it was finally done, but in the course of the filming, over, a year and a half? Was it the filming? Yeah, she seemed to make tremendous strides forward.
Almost 2 years. Yes, she does make, I think, a big progress. And made while we were filming her, from denial to, getting to perform for the first time.
Right, and making those alliances that Karen was talking to her about integrating.
That's very true.
And that's fantastic. And in some ways, it's tempting to, on the most positive side, to say that maybe the process of making the film helped her to make those alliances.
I don't really know.
Well,
I would think that Karen would know better if it did. I know her motivation for all the people who are in the film. That I know for sure, what it was for them to participate. It was because Marche told us that it's hard for me, but I want to do it because when I was first diagnosed, I was looking for information that would prove me that I'm not crazy and there are other people like me that are living somehow with it, and I can see the examples. So she said, if other people see me in that way, I want to do it because of that. And it was all the people's motivation.
No, I think it's fabulous, and I think that we're out of time, but I do want to say that throughout the film, when there's so many questions about the disorder and one wants sort of textbook information about it. But what the success of the film, to me, one of the great successes of the film is that what you approached was the lived-in experience of living with it rather than trying to textbook analyze it or anything else. And Karen offered those kinds of insights about the disorder. But the lived-in experience was so keen to all of us, for us to resonate with our own individual, as much as we are individuals, our own human experience. And so I think that's one of the great beauties of the film. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for
Thank
making
you.
it.